Karen Mitchell dropped her morning coffee all over her pristine white kitchen counter as she stared out the window in absolute horror. The Johnsons had painted their house purple. Not just any purple, electric violet with lime green trim that looked like it belonged in a children's cartoon. Not Sunset Gardens, the most prestigious neighborhood in Cedar Heights. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands, scrolling frantically through the HOA regulations she had memorized by heart. There it was. Section 12.4. Exterior paint colors must be pre-approved from the earth tone palette. This was a clear violation, and as HOA president for the past 4 years, Karen knew exactly what to do. "This ends today," she muttered, marching toward her home office where she kept her violation notice templates organized in color-coded folders. 30 minutes later, Karen stood on the Johnsons' doorstep in her crisp white blazer and matching slacks, clipboard in hand like a weapon. When Lisa Johnson opened the door, Karen barely contained her shock. Lisa looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, unwashed hair, wearing the same clothes she had on yesterday. "Mrs. Johnson, I need to discuss your recent decorating choices," Karen said, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Oh, hi, Karen," Lisa said wearily. "I figured you'd be by soon enough. This color scheme is in direct violation of our community standards. You'll need to repaint immediately or face daily fines starting at $50. Lisa let out a bitter laugh that made Karen step back. "You want to know why I painted my house purple, Karen? Because purple was Emma's favorite color." Karen's clipboard wavered slightly. Emma was Lisa's 8-year-old daughter who had been battling leukemia for 2 years. The whole neighborhood had been following her treatment, but Karen had been too busy with HOA business to pay much attention. "I understand you're going through a difficult time, but the rules exist for everyone's benefit," Karen said, though her voice had lost some of its edge. "Emma died 3 weeks ago," Lisa said quietly. "The funeral was last Tuesday. You would have known that if you'd read any of the emails the neighborhood sent around." The words hit Karen like a physical blow. She had been so focused on preparing for the quarterly HOA meeting that she'd been ignoring her personal emails. She looked at the purple house with new eyes, suddenly seeing it not as a violation but as a memorial. "Mrs. Johnson, I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," Lisa said, her grief transforming into something harder. "You've been so busy policing everyone's mailbox heights and measuring lawn ornaments that you forgot we're actually human beings living here." Karen felt her face burning with embarrassment, but she couldn't back down now. Rules were rules, and if she made exceptions, where would it end? "I'm very sorry for your loss, but I still have to enforce the community guidelines. Perhaps we can work out a payment plan for the repainting costs." Lisa stared at her for a long moment, and Karen saw something shift in her expression. It was the look of someone who had nothing left to lose. "You know what, Karen? Do your worst. Fine me. Sue me. I don't care anymore." She slammed the door, leaving Karen standing alone on the purple porch, her violation notice fluttering in the breeze like a white flag of surrender she wasn't ready to wave. As Karen walked back to her house, she noticed curtains twitching in windows up and down the street. Her neighbors were watching, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that they weren't on her side this time. Her phone buzzed with a text from her husband David. "Heard about the Johnsons. Maybe you should let this one go." But Karen couldn't let it go. She had built her reputation on consistent enforcement of the rules. If she showed weakness now, the entire foundation of her authority would crumble. She had to see this through, even if it meant becoming the villain in someone else's tragedy. What Karen didn't know was that Lisa Johnson had spent the last 3 weeks planning something that would change Sunset Gardens forever. Karen knew what that meant. They were going to ask for her resignation, and she would have to choose between fighting a battle she couldn't win or surrendering the only identity she'd had for the past 4 years. That evening, she found herself walking through the neighborhood she had patrolled for so long with violation notices and measuring tapes. She saw things she had never noticed before. The way Mrs. Patterson's roses spilled over her fence in joyful defiance of the approved landscaping guidelines. The cheerful chaos of the Rodriguez family's front yard, where children's toys mixed with garden gnomes. The purple house that stood like a beacon of love in a world that had forgotten how to be human. At exactly 8 o'clock, Karen knocked on Lisa Johnson's door. Lisa opened it with suspicion in her eyes, but when she saw Karen's face, really saw it, without the armor of authority and righteous indignation, her expression softened slightly. "I came to apologize," Karen said simply, "and to ask you to tell me about Emma." They sat on Lisa's purple porch for 2 hours, surrounded by memorial flowers from neighbors who had loved a little girl Karen had never taken the time to know. Lisa showed her photos and videos, told stories about Emma's dreams and fears, and the way she had faced her illness with a courage that made Karen feel small and petty. "She would have liked you," Lisa said as the evening wound down, "if you'd let her." "I don't think I know how to let people like me anymore," Karen admitted. "I've been so focused on being respected that I forgot how to be human." "It's not too late," Lisa said gently, "but you're going to have to decide what kind of person you want to be." The next morning, Karen walked into the board meeting with her resignation letter in hand, but instead of simply stepping down, she did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She stood up in front of her fellow board members and the dozen residents who had come to watch her downfall, and she told the truth about who she had become and why she wanted to change. "I spent 4 years trying to create the perfect neighborhood," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "But I forgot that perfect neighborhoods aren't made of perfect rules. They're made of imperfect people who care about each other." She submitted her resignation and walked out of the community center into a world where she was no longer HOA President Karen Mitchell, rule enforcer and neighborhood dictator. She was just Karen, a woman who had lost her marriage and her community, but maybe, if she was very lucky and worked very hard, could find her humanity. As she drove past the purple house on her way home, Karen saw Lisa Johnson in the front yard, planting purple flowers in Emma's memory. Lisa looked up and waved, and for the first time in months, Karen smiled and waved back. The war for Sunset Gardens was over, but Karen's journey toward redemption was just beginning. The next morning, Karen woke up to find 17 purple ribbons tied to trees, mailboxes, and garden stakes throughout the neighborhood. Each ribbon had a small card attached with Emma Johnson's photo and the words "in loving memory." Karen's hands trembled as she called her vice president, Margaret Chen. "They're turning this into some kind of publicity stunt. We need an emergency board meeting." "Karen, I don't think that's a wise." "Margaret, if we don't act now, we'll have anarchy. Next week someone will paint their house neon orange and claim it's for their deceased goldfish." The emergency board meeting that evening was unlike any Karen had experienced in her 4 years as president. All 5 board members showed up, but so did 37 residents, the largest attendance in Sunset Gardens history. Lisa Johnson sat in the front row, flanked by neighbors who had never shown interest in HOA politics before. She looked different than she had yesterday, stronger somehow, like grief had burned away everything except her determination. "Before we begin," Lisa stood up, her voice carrying clearly through the community center, "I want everyone to know that Emma always loved walking through our neighborhood." She called it her rainbow walk because she said our houses looked like a box of crayons scattered across the earth. Several people wiped their eyes, and Karen felt a pang of something she couldn't quite identify. "Emma dreamed of living in a purple house someday," Lisa continued. "So I painted our house purple for her. And if that makes me a criminal in Karen Mitchell's eyes, then I guess I'm a criminal." The room erupted in supportive murmurs, and Karen felt the temperature rise as 37 pairs of eyes turned toward her. She stood up, her prepared speech about property values and community standards suddenly feeling inadequate. "Mrs. Johnson, while we all sympathize with your loss, we can't make decisions based on emotion. These rules exist to protect everyone's investment." "Investment?" The voice came from the back of the room. It was Tom Rodriguez, who lived 3 houses down from Karen. "Karen, my house has increased in value by 40% since I bought it 5 years ago, and it was never because of your stupid paint palette." "That's exactly right," added Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow who had lived in Sunset Gardens since it was built. "I've watched this neighborhood become a joyless place where people are afraid to plant flowers without measuring them first." Karen felt panic rising in her chest. She was losing control of the room, losing control of the narrative she had spent years carefully constructing. If we don't maintain standards, property values will plummet and what? Lisa Johnson stood up again, her voice cutting through Karen's protest. And families who are grieving won't be allowed to honor their children, and neighbors won't be allowed to express themselves. And we'll all live in identical beige boxes until we die. The room exploded in applause, and Karen realized with growing horror that she had become the antagonist in her own story. Margaret Chen cleared her throat. Karen, I think we need to vote on suspending the paint color enforcement for the Johnson residents. You can't do that without proper notice and... Actually, we can, said board member James Walsh, pulling out his phone. I've been researching our bylaws, and there's a provision for emergency suspension of rules in cases of undue hardship. The vote was 4-1, with only Karen dissenting. As the meeting broke up, neighbors clustered around Lisa Johnson, offering support and sharing their own stories of HOA frustration. Karen stood alone by the podium, watching her authority evaporate like morning dew. David was waiting for her in the parking lot, his face grave. Karen, we need to talk. Not now, David. I need to figure out how to fix this. Fix what? You tried to find a grieving mother for honoring her dead daughter. There's nothing to fix. There's only apologizing and stepping down. Karen stared at her husband of 15 years, seeing a stranger. Step down. I've given everything to this community. I've sacrificed our weekends, our social life, our marriage, David said quietly. You've sacrificed our marriage, Karen. I can't do this anymore. As David walked away, Karen stood alone in the empty parking lot, surrounded by the suburban kingdom she had ruled with such iron determination. For the first time in 4 years, she wondered if being right was worth being alone. But Lisa Johnson wasn't finished with her yet. Karen discovered Lisa's master plan 3 days later when she opened her front door to find a reporter from the Cedar Heights Gazette standing on her porch with a photographer. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm doing a story about the Purple House controversy. Would you like to comment on residents' claims that you've created a climate of fear in Sunset Gardens? Karen's blood pressure spiked as she realized the scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about a Purple House anymore. This was about her entire reign as HOA president being put on trial in the court of public opinion. I have no comment, she said, slamming the door. But the damage was already done. The story ran the next day with the headline, HOA President Battles Grieving Mother Over Memorial Home. The article painted Karen as a heartless bureaucrat who valued paint colors over human decency, while Lisa Johnson came across as a sympathetic figure fighting for her right to grieve. Karen's phone rang constantly with calls from neighbors, local TV stations, and even a podcast producer who wanted to feature Sunset Gardens in a series about HOA horror stories. Social media picked up the story, and suddenly Karen found herself the target of thousands of strangers who had never heard of Sunset Gardens, but were happy to share their opinions about her character. The breaking point came when David moved out. He packed his bags while Karen sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by 4 years' worth of violation notices and community correspondence, trying to figure out where everything had gone wrong. I used to be proud of you, he said, pausing at the door with his suitcase. You cared about our community, about making it a nice place to live. But somewhere along the way, you started caring more about being in charge than about the people you were supposed to be serving. After he left, Karen sat alone in her perfectly organized house, listening to the silence that had replaced her marriage. She looked out the window at Lisa Johnson's Purple House, which had somehow become the most beautiful thing on the block. Her phone buzzed with a text from Margaret Chen. Emergency board meeting tomorrow. We need to discuss your future as president.